Hey everybody, Jay Schlansky here from the Fifth Trooper Network. I just want to take a moment to thank you for checking out this show. Did you know that over at thefifthtrooper.com we have tons of other content, including blogs, other podcasts, all kinds of stuff. In addition, if you want access to exclusive content, you can join us on patreon.com/thefifthtrooper and join at any level and you'll get access to exclusive blog articles, access to our private Discord, and much more. So please check us out, and thank you so much for all your support.
Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm Kyle. I'm here with Mike.
Oh, hey.
How's it going?
It's pretty good. Kind of sleepy today, but we're powering through. How about you?
Yeah, it's Labor Day, which means that we just finished up a big weekend at NoVa Open in Washington, D.C. It is still called the NoVa Open, even though it's no longer in Northern Virginia. It is in Washington, D.C., but that's okay.
Yeah, it's decidedly not in Northern Virginia at this point.
Yeah, it is. As far as the locale is concerned, it is now the DC Open. But
Yeah.
I think that would probably confuse people that have been previously familiar with the tournament as it existed. So
Yeah, I think it would require a pretty heavy rebrand at this point. It's more like, so.
Yep, is what it is.
Yep.
Food's better downtown.
Oh, 100%. That where do we go? It was a Lucky Buns.
Yeah, the burger place.
Oh man,
That was really good.
That was excellent. And on we we went out for dinner Saturday night. I think we went back to that Chinese place we went to last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
That place was great.
yeah. And it's like literally right next to the menu.
Yep.
So
Anyway, yeah. So Nova Open was this past weekend. The winner was Mike.
oh hey,
Congratulations, Mike.
thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. Turns out I still know how to play Legion, guys. I don't know.
Yeah, even though it's a different game. Hey, you've been getting the reps in, man. So
I have been getting the reps are in, that's for sure. This weekend was helpful in that regard as well.
it was helpful for me. I learned a lot of stuff this weekend. I had two of my, without question, closest games since the new edition released, and in those two games, kind of the first situations. We can go through our games and relevant takeaways and stuff. But for me, that was like the first time where something that was common in Legacy Legion for me, where after the game I was like, man, if I had just instead done this one thing, I would have won.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that's happened for me in the new edition. So I'll talk about what those are when we get to the game recaps. But yeah, so let's just go over the results real quick in brief from a high level, and then we can talk about our own individual experiences.
Yeah, let's do it.
So the winner was Mike, as we previously noted, with Anakin.
Yeah, man.
And you specifically did not play 501st. I think basically because you wanted 3 commandos, right?
Yeah, so I've been playing 501st pretty religiously since the new edition because we kind of came to the conclusion that Anakin is like that's just where you should start.
Accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Turns out he's really dub. But
Yeah.
anyways, and honestly the new way to build arcs are just extremely cheap.
Yeah, clone commander with the arcs. You don't take the heavy.
Yeah,
it's 80 points.
Clone Commander arc. It's the same dice, it's sniper, and it's got reliable. I don't know how it's 80 points because it's the cheapest unit in all of my lists. And it's probably, I don't know if it's I don't know. It's just so efficient at what it does. Anyways, playing 501st, I had been playing 4 arcs, and what I came to the conclusion of was I pretty much always had to have like an arc on a back point not doing anything. And I kind of just came to the conclusion that I would rather have that be like a range 4 commando. And the commandos are just they're so
Ridiculous.
much better in the new edition.
Yeah.
Like the way cover works now, sometimes it's just like, yeah, it's 4 Pierce 1.
Right.
Like,
I wouldn't say sometimes. I would say that's like your base expectation.
yeah, I mean, I think like one of the things that happened in our game specifically, because of the terrain, was like you were like setting up your dudes behind heavy cover, but the commandos have such a long range that they can like pick an angle that like you no longer have cover because of how the cover rules
Because
work.
of the half range thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't know. It's so anyways, yeah. I swapped out a full arc for a commando. And swapped out a 501st. You lose lead from the front basically,
Yeah.
and a full arc for a commando, but you're making the swap for a full arc for a commando, so it's not a big deal. Um, and I guess you sort of lose leaders of the 501st as another command card, but the thing is, like, the new edition of Legion is so fast that you don't even really have time to play it. And there's not even really a good time to play it because you got to have an order on your boy Anakin these days.
You do.
Um, before you kind of be like, yeah, I'll play it on the turn I get flawed, but you don't get flawed anymore. Because yeah, that's how Anakin works. So
Yeah. I mean, it's a setup card, and there aren't really setup turns anymore. And by that I mean like turns where you're kind of looking to build some advantage to like create a situation for the following turn where you're going to do something a little splashier. And now you need every turn has to be something splashy, basically. So
yeah, I mean, I would consider turn one sort of a setup turn for some lists, but the thing is, like, if your setup card does not give orders to your like important pieces, it's like just not a good turn one play. And there's the
right.
Buck first doesn't issue an order to Anakin, so
Yeah,
whatever.
you can't be pulling them out of the bag really ever, but
You can't you
certainly
can't
not
you
on the
can't
first
punt a
turn.
turn with your most important piece in this
Exactly.
this edition. So
Yeah. So I ran B2s with Grievous. Um when we go through our games, I'll talk a little bit more about my feedback here, but it's very durable. It's a one trick pony. It's a really good trick, but it is a one trick pony.
it's certainly
Um,
very durable.
yeah. Um, so I did make top 8. I went 4-2 on the first day. Um, so and then rounding out the rest of the top 8, there was another Republic, which was Sam playing Yoda Anakin,
Yep.
and there were 4 Empire. So there was Blizzard, there was a double ATST list, um, there was a Vader Dues,
There were two
and
videos.
there were 2 Vader Dues. Okay,
Yeah.
so there you go. So that's the 4, right?
Yep.
And then there were 2 droids, one of which was me, the other which was Josh Prosser, who was running basically the all Makashi list, right?
Yeah.
Dooku, Ventress. Did he also have Grievous?
He had Dooku, Ventress, Grievous, and he used to have Maul. I actually played him at Curio like two
Okay.
weeks ago, and we had a conversation about it after the game. I was like, I think you got one too many focus pieces, man.
Yeah.
You got to pull one, and he decided on Maul, which I think I played him at Curio, and I played him again this weekend, and I think our game this weekend was much closer. So
Yeah, and then he's got like 3 Magna Guard as well.
yes, yeah. He
Um,
basically like traded Maul for 2 Magna Guardians, which was a big upgrade.
yeah, Magnus is still great. I used Magnus, and I was very sad that I did not have more Magnus. Let's put
I
it
was
that
gonna
way.
say, I think your BX spreads would have been way better as Magnas,
Yeah, and it's
at
basically
least
the
in our
same
games.
cost. It, definitely. I mean, yeah, and they're basically the same cost. If you're taking a heavy on the BX droids, which
Yeah,
if you're not doing that, then like why are you taking them?
I think
Uh,
the only reason to take the BX droids over Magnus is if you want the sniper. But if you're just
yeah,
going with the like Chargy Boy BX droids, I think you'd rather just your unit get free tokens and have 3 extra wounds and immune to piercing the other.
Yeah, and hand out immobilized tokens in melee,
That too, yes.
which is actually a lot more relevant than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It turns
so
out movement is very important in this new world.
yeah, so no rebel representation in the top eight.
Yeah.
I think the
Top
top
Rebel
rebel
was 16th.
16. Yep.
Yep. And I would just like to echoing our earlier sentiments from talking about the latest UK tournament, there was no Rebel player over 0.5.
Yeah. No rebel player with a winning record.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh so sad.
Yeah. It's
I
certainly
mean,
not
well,
trying to beat up on the Rebels.
yeah.
I just like I think at least early indication is we either haven't figured it out or they're gonna need some help.
Yeah, and they are getting some help in the form of the sleeper cell, which looks amazing.
It
Um,
does.
I don't know if it's going to be enough help, but it also seems like they have a lot of. I mean, we've talked about this on previous episodes, but AMG has specifically and clearly said that we basically only got a part one of the unit card updates, and there are a lot of. If their intent is to go through and do a glow up for most, if not all of the units, then Rebels still have a ton of stuff that has not been touched yet. So
Yeah. I definitely think I think my analysis of what's going on here, at least at this juncture, is that the rebel identity has kind of been forced even farther into the dodge token category with this edition, which I think is like cool and great because I think rebel troopers are a lot better. I think the issue is that everybody's played clone commandos and they literally don't care about dodge
yeah.
tokens.
Hmm.
Like and on a secondary note, I actually think that if you're like playing a non-republic list and you're like trying to like put cunning deployment in your as an advantage in your deck, um cunning deployment kind of sucks when the only thing that like half the field is shooting with you on turn one is high velocity guns.
Yeah, it's really not useful. I took it and I got it several times in any of my games and it did nothing
Yeah. As a
basically.
clone player, I'm like all about it because we like share the dodge tokens.
Right.
Like, sometimes you don't play clones, but like, I don't know. Uh, yeah.
Advanced intel is clearly the best advantage and it's not particularly close. That's the best
Yeah.
token one.
Yeah, I think there's actually like a statistic that we went over in our local Discord today where I believe that is the advantage that is like head and shoulders above the rest based on the Longshanks numbers.
Yeah, the you can sort basically by like win rate by which advantage uh players got, and I think advanced intel, if a player got advanced intel, they had like a 62% win rate,
Yeah.
which is really high for just having an advantage card. And that was like significantly higher than the other advantages.
I'm pretty sure none of the other advantages were above 0.5.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm trying to find it, but that's my recollection is that that one had a 62% and the others were all 50 or below, basically.
yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah, I'm actually looking at it right now. Advanced Intel is at 62. The next highest is Cunning Deployment at 49. And then Ordnance at 47, Fortified and Strafing Run at 46, and shocker, Garrison at 35%.
yeah, that one's terrible.
Yeah. Uh,
I could see that being really only useful, and the utility of a strategy like this is kind of debatable anyway. But if you basically play like a vet or a shore list where your entire list has prepared positions and you just have,
like,
like one unit that doesn't have it.
well, the issue is that Garrison I'm pretty sure can only give it to core units.
Okay, so if that's the case, then there's no situation where that's going to be useful.
Well, you would have to be like playing a list that's like, I don't know, like 5 vets and like a rebel trooper, and your plan is to like garrison the rebel trooper unit, you know?
Right. And if that's your plan, why not just get a sixth vet?
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. Or like, take 5 short troopers and yeah, I don't know. I
Yeah,
got
I'm with you.
yep. Um,
All right. Well, let's talk about our games real quick.
yeah.
So, uh, I ended up my record on the whole for the weekend was 4-3, which is obviously not great. I did win my first 4 games in a row, as did you, which is why we ended up playing each other on Saturday.
Yep.
And I think we were the only two 4-0 players at that point.
We were.
Um,
Yes.
but yeah, then I hit the gauntlet, the Republic gauntlet, if you will. So, um, just basically in general, how the list played, it was so that it was Grievous, a super tech, 6 B2s, 4 of which had the repair bots, all of which had ACMs, and then I had a Magna unit with a whip and poison vibros, BXs. So it's just really durable. I was doing like efficiency calculations in the lead up to the tournament, and it has something like 75 red save wounds, um, which when you count for surge token access is more than 200 effective wounds.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Uh, Now, there's a couple caveats there. The first is that the surge token access, in contrast to, clones, which was the other thing I was considering, is significantly worse.
Yeah,
Uh, per-
clones are like always on, and the B2s, at least in our game, did not feel that way.
right. So the clones generate they all generate their own surge tokens every turn without having to do anything with command cards or aggressive tactics or anything like that.
Yeah,
Basically,
assuming you build your list right, which is a fundamental thing that I do think like, if you're taking arcs without clone commanders, like that's not gonna happen. But yeah,
yeah. So if you build your list, you're taking obviously clone infantry generate their own surges. If you're taking arcs, you should be taking them with the clone commander, so they generate their own surges. If you're running clone commandos, which you should be, uh,
they should be getting surged a
they should
lot.
be getting surge to block from your complete the mission tokens. They should also be frequently getting critical 2 on their attack for the same reason. And then, of course, Anakin surges against ranged attacks at least, because deflect is always on, and then you should be giving him to the fray so he surges defensively. So basically, like if you're building a Republic list right now, your whole army should have reasonable and consistent access to surges. I found, even though I built it to try and get as much surge access as possible, um, the droid equivalent with the B2s just doesn't have very good access to surges. Definitely on the Supreme Commander turn, you have a lot. That's like the one turn where you have most of the surges that you want. Um, but even then, it's only like 1 to 2 per unit, and B2s really suck those things down because they have big attack pools,
They do.
and they need them defensively too, and they can't share them. I think is one of the biggest things. So you could you get 2 surges from Supreme Commander on a B2 unit. They attack something, they roll 1 surge, and then your opponent shoots a different unit, and you've wasted a surge token. Whereas if you're playing clones, you're not going to waste that surge token because you're going to be able to spend it via sharing. Um, so yeah, I found that the surge token access was just a real challenge consistently. When you can get surges, they're super useful, but I was feeling pretty surge starved. All that said, it's still ridiculously durable because of the repair. The number of times where my opponent would kill like 2 models and then I'd use 2 separate repairs to put those 2 models back.
It was yeah. Yes. I will say, it definitely like I felt like in our game it felt less resilient than I was expecting it to feel.
I think that's because of the clone commandos, though. So the
Yes. Yeah,
second
no,
caveat
no
was,
doubt.
besides the surge access, was that just like any other red saves, they are vulnerable to good pools that have Pierce, which of course is clone commandos, right? And you can't really hide from them. So the B2s were just taking it on the chin with 4 saves, Pierce 1, 4 saves, Pierce 1, 4 saves, Pierce 1, and like every time that happened, I was picking up 2 B2 models basically.
Yeah, when you're taking 12
Um,
Pierce 3 to your red save units like every turn, like you're taking 2 lightsabers to the face, basically.
yeah, exactly.
At range 4.
Right. So, and I was repairing them. I was bringing them back. And in our game, um, so let's just talk about our game real quick.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, that was our game 5, basically. Well, gonna tell folks what you did with Anakin
Yeah, so this
in
was,
this game.
in hindsight, I would not do this again because it did not work out. I want a
Well,
copy.
it was an experiment,
It was
and
definitely an experiment.
it,
I went into this game because we had obviously sort of theory crafted the like effective hit points of Kyle's list ahead of time, and I was like well aware that it was like I was gonna have to do a lot of damage to this list. So my game plan was I was just gonna plant Anakin in the middle of his army turn one. So I prepared positions, Anakin. The only thing I think in your list that shot beyond range two was the BX droids.
yeah,
Which once you like factor in like backup and deflect and stuff, and the fact that I had like three medics, I wasn't super concerned about. So I prepared positions to him at like the front of my deployment zone.
right.
And I played as one pip turn one, and I burst of speed
Yeah,
for three speed three moves, and I basically finished turn one on Kyle's board
yeah.
effectively.
I mean, I think you were like maybe 4 inches
Three
from
or
my
four
board
inches
edge.
off,
Yeah,
but like I
yeah,
was well within your deployment
yeah.
zone. While triggering charge, I definitely forgot that you had a Magna Guard that had a whip,
Yep.
which ended up being a problem. You ended up killing Anakin because of that
On turn two.
on turn two.
Yep.
Um, so I sort of like played the game down Anakin as opposed to
Right.
the game plan of just like having Anakin in your lines, just like slicing things up, which obviously wasn't ideal. But I was still able to kind of chew through the rest of your army with with the clones. I don't know. Uh,
Yeah, it was funny because after that happened, I was like, I should be feeling pretty good right now, but I'm not. Because that's like still a lot of clones.
yeah,
And it was. I mean, I'd say we kind of traded pretty evenly on attrition for the rest of the game. And that led to an end game state where we were either tied or very close to tied on victory points.
yeah.
And
I definitely made a mistake in hindsight that led to you potentially winning the game. I never so we ended up in a situation where I should not have withdrawn a unit out of a melee because if I hadn't, it effectively gave you two speed two moves as opposed to a speed one and then a speed two to make my life miserable. Uh,
yeah, although I think withdrawing that unit netted you a victory point. So it might have still been a wash.
it did, but what was gonna happen was so what ended up happening was um I scored 1 point off that unit, but it allowed you to pull my third unit, I think, off the other point, if I recall correctly.
Right, but on to another point. So
Correct, but I would have gotten 3 points for the point that they were on because I would have blown up your bunker.
that's right. Yeah.
Um,
But
so
yeah, but I
yeah,
think I also made a mistake.
yeah,
Um, and my mistake basically was I had two options with that unit that you freed up by withdrawing. Um, and it was I could either try and directly just contest the point and defend my bunker and prevent you from securing it. But it was like super close whether I was going to actually be able to get there or not. Or I could melee one of your units that had kind of cohered backwards that was on that point, and thereby pulling the unit leader off the point. But when you did that, you were able to like contest your back point and prevent me from securing it and getting it the victory point. So it prevented you from scoring the three, but then it gave you an opportunity to score one.
yeah.
And we ended by a difference of one victory point, and I think I was up on kill points
You
actually.
were you were up on kill
Um,
points.
but
Uh,
yeah, to your point, I guess if you had just left that unit in melee, you would have scored the three victory points from blowing up the bunker
Yeah,
regardless.
and I definitely I shouldn't have withdrawn them. I didn't think you could get that unit over there, to be
Yeah.
honest. And I didn't want to measure it because I didn't didn't want to
Right.
like
Yeah.
give away the game. I definitely messed up two things: the cohesion on the unit that you were able to melee. They should have just been cohered towards the point,
Mhm.
so that you couldn't pull me off. A and B, I should have never left melee.
Yep.
But that's like some of the things where like we're learning a new edition with new objectives and like figuring out like the very like specific things you need to do in these circumstances when playing some of this stuff is still like a learning in progress sort of situation.
Yeah, and just specific to the separatist list and melee in general, I found that even though basically I designed the list such that there were like no desirable units to engage in melee. The whole thing is B2s, Magnas, and Vibro BXs and Grievous, basically. So if you've got Anakin or another melee unit or something, everything that you're engaging is going to be able to punch back pretty reasonably. And I just found that in practice, the B2s are just like not that great at that.
They're
I
certainly
mean,
not arcs, that's for sure.
right. I mean, they yeah, primarily again because they don't get the same kind of token access,
Yeah.
but they also don't have, you know, their defensive efficiency is amazing because they're 2 wounds per model. But unless you're paying, the exorbitant price for the super squad, at most you still only have 4 like combat models. So even when you're at 4 strength, you're throwing 8 dice instead of what most other specialist melee units are throwing, which is 10.
Yeah.
And you don't have you're less likely to have the surges, you're less likely to have the aims. They don't have charge. Uh, so while it was like nice in some situations to be able to be like, hey, I can throw 2 black dice for a model here when I happen to find myself in melee. I found that when they were in melee, it was pretty much always a situation where I was like, I'd rather they just not be here right now. Um,
Yeah.
and in fact, my game against Josh, who was running Vader Dudes, there were several situations where he just like tied B2s up in melee with random stormtroopers, and it led to me not being able to score points.
Yeah.
um,
It's an issue for sure.
yeah, and he, that was a game I ended up also losing by 1 victory point. And the only unit he killed was Grievous, and I killed lots of his, like most of his army, including Vader. But I still lost because I couldn't get to the points that I needed to get to. I mean, B2s are, they're quote unquote normal speed, but there's not really anything in that list that can like it doesn't have the flexibility to reposition and go somewhere else or split up really.
Yeah, there's no
So
like I'm gonna make I have a specific unit that can like turn on the gas to make something happen. Um,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
So I'm looking at I still think B2s are an interesting base for a list just because they are. So I mean they're zombies basically. Like they're just a giant slab of unkillable beef that keeps coming back. Um, which is great. Like the list is very good at going to a spot on the table and then just not dying, which gets you pretty far by itself.
oh, totally. I mean, I think against most lists, that's totally fine.
Yeah. But I do need to look at retooling some things to make it a little more flexible for objective reasons. And I think that starts with removing Grievous, who's
Yeah,
just still, I don't want to say, I would say he's gone from like bad to mediocre.
yeah, he's like fine. He's
He's
like
fine.
I'd put him in like the Iden Cassian category. Like, it's fine,
Yeah.
but like I'm not like scared if you put him on the table, like.
Yeah, Supreme Commander was great for the surges. The Ruthless part of that card I found like I didn't actually use that often, just because I was already so close at the start of turn 2 for the most part that it just wasn't necessary. Or the tempo was off where I needed to play something else on turn 2, and then by the time I was playing Supreme Commander, I was there anyway.
It's definitely like it feels like something you want to do on turn like 1, but the fact that you've only got range 2 units really to use it on, like a double move plus a shot is if your opponent knows what they're doing, is not going to land on turn 1. And on turn 2, you don't need it generally.
Right. Exactly. So yeah. So that part of the Grievous kit I was a little bit underwhelmed by. And then Grievous himself is still super suppressible. Obviously backup is nice. Guardian with the Magnus is nice, but neither of those things help with suppression.
No.
Like he gets shot, he still takes the suppression, even if you give the hits away to backup. And 2 suppression is enough to make it so that he can't move more than 1 time. And he doesn't have a 4 slot for bursted speed. So like there were a lot of games where I've found that he was just kind of like suppressedly slow walking his way toward his target.
Yeah.
And you know, he also doesn't have jump. So it's hard. He's slower going over stuff than most force users are. And I don't think I swung his lightsabers more than twice in a given game.
Really?
And that's through a combination of him being suppressed, him not having access to burst of speed to just get where he needed to go, and him just dying. um, I I think he died in 5 of my 7 games. No, sorry, 4, which is like still a lot given that I won 4 games.
Yeah.
Like there was one game where he just totally biffed a save. You know, he got shot by some Mandos at point blank range, and I went like 0 for 6. Just okay, so that
Sometimes it
happened.
happens.
And then there were other games where he just got shot a few times, or he got. I mean, in our game before Anakin died, he did like 5 wins to Grievous. Grievous actually ended up not dying in our game,
He did.
but it forced me to like hide him, whereas I would have rather had him charging towards your clone commandos.
Yeah, he definitely didn't do much relevant as far as killing stuff went, I feel like.
Well, yeah, and on that last turn, he took a swing at both a swing and trained in your Jedi arts. I played that on turn 5. He took a normal lightsaber swing and a trained in your Jedi arts melee shot at a clone commando unit, which was like a marked clone commando unit. Um, and he killed 2 models between those 2 things.
I mean, in fairness, like that was definitely like an above average defensive
it was, but when
swing.
you're surging red saves, like that's a thing that happens.
It
You know?
is. It is. Yeah, I definitely all weekend all weekend people were telling me, man, I thought Clone Commandos like their weakness was melee.
Mhm.
And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess.
Right.
Like,
There's still surging red save units that throw double black in melee. So
yeah, often critical too.
like yeah, that's how you get around the shield and how you get around Katarn. But that's only like half of their defensive kit.
Yeah, I mean they're still sharing like often like I'd have like a force user in my lines and they would continue to fail to kill the commandos because like I've got like shared dodge tokens and stuff,
Right.
you know, like
Exactly.
so it's like yeah, I mean you're only gonna deal like 3 pierce 3, the unit leader is left alive. Woo. Um
Right.
so yeah. You
Yeah.
don't so you said you only swung Grievous's lightsabers how many times?
No more than 2 times in a given game.
Okay.
Uh, I don't think I ever swung it 3 times in any of my games.
Okay. I'm pretty sure, just from a point of comparison, that
Yeah.
I swung Anakin's lightsaber over an average of once per turn across 9 games.
Yeah. Which, you know, and the differences there are A, he's got a triple move card, right?
Yep.
B, he has a 4 slot for burst of speed. C, he has courage 3.
Yep.
And D, tempted.
Yeah, and he's got a double attack card too. But yeah,
And he has a double attack card.
yeah,
So
which is really like a triple attack card if you count tempted.
exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So
I started being like real Uh, I started not spending surge tokens to let my units die to trigger tempted in this tournament. I had not done that previously, but I'm like, oh yeah, I've got this unit alive on like 2 guys. Be a real shame if they died right now.
oh no, Anakin's mad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, oh, sorry, I'm swinging. And like when you trigger tempted on his 2 pip turn, it's like really gross.
Yeah. I mean, even on a normal turn, if you've got tenacity, it's 6 red pierce 3.
Oh yeah, I
So
mean,
it's in a situation where it's like, oh, good, you finished off a 1 model unit, and I now wipe a full health unit of yours in
yeah.
exchange.
It's just like, yeah, your stormtrooper unit is now gone. Thank you for killing my unit leader. I do want to just like I don't think it's like worth dwelling on super hard, but I do think like tempted is a stupid keyword that needs to get looked at. I
It's a
just from
negative
a
play
balance
experience.
perspective, it is not. Look, as a person with Tempted, it's super fun, but as an opponent, you're really damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like you're kind of in a no-win situation, and it does.
It doesn't feel good.
I don't think if yeah, I mean I can't really speak that doesn't feel good for me, but I mean I just the despair in my opponents that were like, I can't even really kill anything right now, otherwise you're just gonna annihilate me. And I don't know. Um yeah, I do think Tempted needs to be looked at. I don't know if yeah. Um but
Okay.
anyways, I went 9-0 on the weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is great. Congratulations.
Yeah. Um I think I don't know. Do you want to like go through specific games? How do you want to do this?
I mean, I'd want to hear about your most interesting slash closest games, I think. And if
I
that's
think
only a
the
handful of games, then
I think the closest game was the one we already talked about between me and you. The hardest game I had was definitely against Josh in the finals.
okay.
In that at the end it wasn't close, like victory point wise and stuff, but it definitely was. It was the Darth Vader triple dues list. We were playing close the pocket, and he basically he kind of gave up the gunfight on turn two to like take the center with like 7 units. Um, which I didn't really expect him to do.
Hmm.
Because stormtroopers obviously like die pretty quickly to everything in my army.
Yeah.
Um, and so it kind of came down to like, can I churn through killing everything fast enough in order to like come back from like a 4 victory point deficit? Um, Turned out the answer was yes, because Tempted is silly and arcs one shot things that they're double move charging into. But it was like, it was definitely kind of, and it was an normally I am like in the driver's seat on the victory points. It was the first game all day, all weekend that I think I was like significantly down on at the end of like turn three. You know, I was down like 3 points, I think, at the end of turn three, which in my experience so far, if you're down by 2 at any point, the likelihood that you win that game is
It's
like
very low.
is very low.
Yep.
Um at least that's how it feels so far. I definitely think that like if you're going into a competitive tournament or a competitive setting, like your focus at on every turn, you should endeavor to score the max amount of victory points, regardless of how many units it costs you. Like obviously make it cost the least amount of units possible to get those maximum victory points. But if you're not achieving the maximum threshold of victory points every turn, um, you're probably falling behind.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of exceptions to that. Like you have to look at what's reasonable for you to like if there's, for example, there are some primaries in particular where scoring objectives in your opponent's territory is like bunker assault, for example.
Yeah.
That's one where I think the score maximum every time thing doesn't quite apply, in that yes, you need to make sure you're securing your 2 bunkers basically every turn. Um, but it might not, the juice might not be worth the squeeze to like charge a bunch of units on turn 2 directly at your opponent's home bunkers
Yeah. I agree.
immediately, especially because you can destroy them and get 3 victory points, over the course of potentially just 2 turns.
Yes. I definitely think I guess the rephrased, you should score the maximum amount of victory points that is presently available to your army at the start of the turn.
Yeah.
It, obviously if you have to sacrifice your entire army to maybe secure like a bunker assault bunker, like don't do it.
Right. You still have to look at what is reasonable. But to the extent that there's like either quote unquote home points of interest or like mid points of interest,
Yeah.
you should be scoring. Your goal should be to score those, all of those, however many there are, every turn.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about the ones that have like enemy territory points of interest, that's a little bit of a different situation, but
I agree. And I definitely like, as long as you're staying at parity with your opponent victory point wise, I think you're feeling okay. But the minute you start to fall behind, it all of a sudden you have to kind of like flip the script on a later turn, and you basically have to double whatever they're scoring that turn to make up the difference, which is a lot harder than just going one up on them. You kind of have to go +2 to make it back a lot of the time. So
yeah, and that's what happened to me in my game against Josh. He was playing the Vader Dues, and we were playing the I forget which one it is, but it's the one where you have like the intel tokens and you can,
oh yeah, it's
score a point just by contesting it. And there's four in a diamond, and two
yeah,
of them
it's
are in the
my least
middle.
favorite objective by a
Yeah,
lot.
mine too. And I ended that game. The kill points were like 130 to like 750 in my favor. But he created a situation where he played Master of Evil on Vader on turn 2, and on one of those two like mid victory points, he had Vader close enough to it to where, once he went, and he had 11 activations, so he's guaranteed to go after me. Once he went with Vader, he was going to suppression bomb everything on that point. And he basically spent the turn just like throwing one suppression on the units that I had over on that point. So that if I moved any units onto the point at the end of the turn, he was just going to make him have 4 suppression, and it would be impossible for me to score that point, basically. So I didn't score, one of the 2 central points on turn 2, and that put me kind of permanently behind.
Yeah.
And I was able to like end up in a situation where I scored, 4 victory points on turn 5, but I still ended up like 1 victory point short because I started the scoring behind, even though I was like way up on attrition. It ended up not mattering basically. So
I do think that that's a good shout out. I actually think Courage 3 heroes are like a much bigger deal than they used to be.
yes,
Because it's actually like Vader suppression bomb aside, often like panicking one unit off a point will really mess with your opponent's like math to like actually secure it. And if the amount of suppression tokens they have to get to on that unit is only 4, it's actually like pretty reasonable to
that's
get
very
there.
achievable, especially if they
Yeah,
have suppression weapons. That's only 2 shots.
totally. So if you got commandos,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
Commandos, range troopers,
Uh,
um, mortars.
yeah.
So
Um, yeah. I don't really know how many other takeaways I had from this tournament outside of, I think Gar's coming in pretty hot.
how would you deal with the commandos as a if you were looking to counter commandos slash Anakin, how would you do that?
um, so I think this is part of the like as like I'm a player trying to attack a tournament that is going to be filled with Gar players.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think where I would start is what does scare me is like a list with like 6 snipers in it. Um, Now I'm not sure how good that list is going to be against things that aren't Republic and Commandos, but I do think that like if you've got 6 high velocity sniper Pierce 1 guns, like you're gonna probably bring down a commando unit every turn. Uh After turn 1, because the commandos are going to deploy last. I have started deploying Anakin before my commandos in almost all my games.
Yeah.
Um for just to keep the commandos safe and to set up better shots. Um which is a weird feeling. Just like deploying your force user not last, but
Right.
whatever. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that's where I would start. Again, I'm not sure that a list like that is going to have enough dice to deal with something like a B2 horde. I think that's the fundamental issue that I kind of am coming up with when I'm trying to like figure this out. Um, from a non-Gar perspective. I definitely think 5.0 first, like oops, all snipers can do it, but like that's also because you're playing commandos. So,
Right. You have
like,
the oops all snipers plus commandos.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't have a great answer for that, to be completely legit. I think all of the sniper options are super overpriced. I think that's part of the reason that Gar is as good as they are. Um,
Yeah, I mean that's the historic counter to clones, right? Is
yeah,
snipers.
yeah. And I don't know, maybe we're sleeping on the snipers, but I haven't been able to build a list that after I, fill out a list with like, you know, anything for snipers plus, it's really hard to fit anything else relevant in there.
Yeah. I looked at running like BX snipers and stuff, and I mean they're so expensive.
They're very expensive. They're just compared to the other options that you can take, it's just like the thing about it fundamentally is that paying the range 5 is not worth paying for because you're pretty much always range 3 of your target. Obviously, that's like not always the case, but like you pretty much always can be
Yes.
range 3 of your target if you want to be. So, I mean, I think there might be merit to having like one strike team that's, range 5 away from everything that like can hold your back, recover the research point, and shoot, whatever is at the front. But you don't want 4 units back there, like because
Right.
you have to be using the thing about it is that the units that you are paying for also have to be durable enough to score points on the front lines, and strike
Right.
teams don't do that. So, having 3 squads on your back points are kind of redundant. Unfortunately, that's just how the game works now. So, I don't know. I think maybe you try and takes fleets with shotguns. I don't know. I've got nothing. I've got nothing. I
When
will
you're
say,
spitballing fleets with shotguns, that's not a good
yeah. I mean, I will say like I have found ion guns like a little bit annoying against the commandos. They shut the shields down immediately, which yeah, I mean it's not a huge deal, but it is something. And there's a decent amount of weapons in the game now that kind of incidentally do that. Bistan, snow ion gun, I actually think is pretty good now in comparison to what it used to be. I mean, I don't think it's
the
great.
snows themselves are terrible though. I mean, speed one is absolutely like disqualifying, basically.
Yeah, I definitely, I had been talking to Sam who had played Yoda this weekend a lot, and he's like Yoda just like if he's not playing burst of speed or on a speed 1 turn, like he's just like or on his
Speed
one
three
pip,
turn. Yeah.
yeah, he's just like not relevant.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I would love to see Yoda and Palp just go to speed 2. I think in this, I don't think you can pay 200 points for a unit that moves speed 1 at this juncture. That's just completely unreasonable. I don't know. I think those are the only those are the only speed 1 characters in the game at this point.
Hoggle, but he can triple move.
Yeah, yeah, he's a little different.
Yeah.
So um
And Vader. But again, he has access to burst and infiltrate.
and the infiltrate goes a long way
It
in making
does.
sure he's in a relevant position.
Yeah.
I do think that this weekend also highlighted to me that, we've kind of been, I think, a little bit back and forth on the force push conversation and like, is it too expensive? Should you take it at all? Is it any good? Blah, 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 blah. I'm definitely in the if you want to win a tournament, like a high level tournament, I think you have to have force push just because you have to deal with an Anakin that also is going to have force push at some juncture. I'm not saying that that's the only way to beat Anakin, but I am gonna say that that is the best way to make sure that you are not like blowing actions and activations to make sure that that tempted is not destroying your face.
Yeah.
Frankly, like, so,
Yeah, and it's a little awkward too because I would say most force users are kind of like not worth the 40-point investment.
yeah, I think anybody that doesn't have Master of the Forest, with maybe the exception of Maul, shouldn't take it anyways. But and I think we're in a weird space where I'm not sure. Like, I think the Force users that don't have Master of the Force still might be a little too expensive now that Force Push is 40 points.
Yeah.
Like I'm not sure like we're willing to pay 130 points for Asajj without Force Push. Like eight dice is great, but it really is only like 4 Pierce 2 most of the time. Eh. I'd
Yeah, and
rather
she's
just
got
take
5 health.
Yeah, I'd rather take an 80-point commando unit that's throwing 10 black dice with 2 to 3 aim tokens. Like it doesn't they don't the offensive output isn't there.
Yeah,
And
or take a B2 unit with a PK
it,
for 100 points, which is 30 points cheaper. They have the same melee without the pierce, granted, but they also have like more than twice as many wounds. And that's significantly better ranged attack.
totally. And I also think I'm of the opinion that Pierce is actually like outside of the commando equation. I actually think Pierce is like the least relevant it's ever been because of how much dice is being thrown around the table at all times. Like before, one of the reasons Pierce was so good is because like when you landed an attack, it had to matter.
Right.
And now you're just throwing like 60 dice at your opponent every turn. They're gonna fail their saves. Like at some juncture over the course of the turn. It is gonna or over the course of the game. That's not to say that Pierce isn't good, but I do think that like it's less essential.
Yeah. It's less about landing small but reliable kills as it is about just trying to bury your opponent in a wall of dice as often and as early as possible. And most pools that have Pierce are tend to be small pools where you're not going to end up with more than like a couple of hits anyway. Obviously, that like the shotguns and commandos and stuff like that accepted, but um, yeah, I'd say the relative value has gone down for that reason that you referenced. So
Yeah. So I don't know where that leaves the like Asajj's and Commander Luke's and like Ahsoka's of the world. I guess Inquisitors are in the same kind of bracket.
it's just really awkward.
It's a super awkward spot to be. I'm not gonna claim to know what the answer or what those units should cost, but they definitely feel a little too expensive still. Even new Commander Luke, I think, has kind of been like,
Yeah, I'm
eh.
with you.
Um, the other thing that I kind of like, I played against a bunch of speeder bikes this weekend. Man, does not getting heavy cover from terrain for vehicles suck. Oh boy.
Yeah, I mean the speeder bikes were already fragile,
Yeah.
and now they're even more fragile.
They're
I
even more
mean,
fragile and they're
and
more
they're more expensive.
expensive.
Yeah,
And I just was like, yeah, I moved my Z6 unit up. Okay, I guess your bike's dead.
right.
Like,
Whereas previously, like you'd probably do 2 wounds in that situation, and you'd still have an alive. Like maybe you'd lose a bike model, maybe you
yeah, you
wouldn't,
wouldn't lose the
but
squad,
you
but
definitely would not lose the entire squad. And now you just lose the entire squad.
yeah, now it's like, yeah, you either lose the squad or you're losing like the bike and you have like 1 health left on the other bike. And
Right.
it's just um yeah, the speeder bikes are not worth their points.
They, they've always been like a super scalpel unit, one that is about speed and mobility and angles and kind of picking off isolated units. And it's just not really a thing anymore. Just from like a tactical usefulness perspective.
Yeah, I
So
mean, I could see like a one of speeder bike potentially being like, you keep it like way in the back until like where no one can ever shoot it until like just the right moment. But like the days of mass speeder bikes, I think are way over.
yep,
Because honestly, for an 80-point unit or 85 or however much they're costing now, like they only throw 6 dice and they're not even that great. Like it's like, is it worse than us? I guess it's like a little bit better than a Stormtrooper DLT, like marginal.
slightly. Yeah. So if you're talking about like the Empire speeder bikes, that's an average of 3.75 hits, whereas a Stormtrooper DLT is like 3.125
Yeah,
ish. So yeah, it's less than one hit better than a Stormtrooper DLT.
yeah.
And the Stormtrooper DLT is substantially more durable. Still very likely to be where they need to be because see, like I think that's the thing with quote unquote fast units, right? Is since everything is so much closer, everything is centrally located. Your normal trooper units, which you're not paying a speed premium on, can get to where they need to go for the most
Yep.
part.
Mm-hmm.
There are clear exceptions, like situations where you need to shift from, there are a couple primaries where you have like kind of two very heavily like breakthrough or the intel token one where you have like 2 points that are, basically in two completely separate
You're
halves of the
fighting
table.
two separate battles.
You're
Yeah,
fighting on like two 3x3s,
yeah.
basically. And in those situations, if you need to pivot like later in the game with the trooper unit, that can be difficult.
Yeah, I would dare say impossible.
Yeah. So like a speeder bike would be good in that situation, but what's the chances that they're still alive by the time you need to do
That's the main
that?
thing. It's just like you're either already losing the game at that point, or I don't know. The game's like pretty much decided, I think. If that's the situation you're in, that you have to pivot off of a point like that, like the speeder bikes still, like they can't get from like one breakthrough zone to the other in one turn. Like it's still going
Right.
to take them 2 turns to do that, right? It's almost like those objectives I think are like range 10 from each other. Um,
It's pretty far. Yeah.
so like, yeah, I don't know. I was very uninspired by the speeder bikes. Played against Blizzard Force a couple times, and it just was kind of like, okay, well, your bikes are dead. Um, again, that maybe that's just a symptom of commandos. I don't know, but
Yeah, as a historic speeder bike player, I tend to agree that like that. I just don't I love playing speeder bikes and I don't see a reason to take them right now.
yeah.
I'd love to make room for Staps in the B2 list that I'm
Oh
running.
God,
But
don't even think about that.
I mean, they're- yeah, they immediately melt.
I guess they might be a little bit better than speeder bikes just because they'll have the dodge tokens, but
And you'll have perfect order control of them
yeah,
because of coordinate. But even still, like once they're in engagement range, they just immediately die.
yeah, yeah. That's
That was true before, and it's even more true now. So
I also like on the kind of like vehicle speeder bike thing. It came up in the finals with the dewbacks, but the inability for like vehicles to like displace things is like really, really limiting to those units movement and
yes,
their like ability to score points. One of the things that we found uh in the finals game is like we just had a like a block of like infantry around each close the pocket point.
yep.
And it was just like it was impossible for the dewbacks to even score the point because there was so much infantry just huddled around it like in melee for like 3 turns. Um
That happened in my first. I played Josh twice. That happened in my first game with him, and we played close the pocket, and the center point was just an absolute mosh pit.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's just like, and it eventually cleared out, but like because the infantry was like so close together, like even though they weren't touching each other, like they still couldn't get the do back in. It didn't matter.
right. Yeah.
Um, and heaven forbid that had been like an ATST trying to get in there or something with like a much bigger base. I'm not advocating for displacement to come back, to be clear, because
I think that's a net win still for the game generally.
yeah, I do
Yeah.
think that the units of the vehicle and creature trooper variety have ended up being less good than I expected them to be because frankly, they just can't score sometimes. Even you could be in a situation where like you should be winning because like you're up and you're killing your opponent, but like you just can't get your unit to where they need to be, even though you've got the move distance. You can just get kind of shut out of a point. Um,
Yep.
so I don't know. I'm not sure there's a solve there, but that is something to watch out for if you're bringing vehicles and stuff. Um,
I've always thought there's probably a middle ground where you can still make displacement like allowed. You just make it such that it's other than the unit being able to end where it wants to, there's no benefit to
like no
the player
suppression.
doing no suppression.
Yeah.
Make it like a instead of a speed 1 move away, make it like a speed 2 move. So you can't do the thing with like a really large base where you can kind of force the unit to go in a specific direction just by giving them no options.
Yeah. Yeah.
Make it like a ridiculous, potentially very beneficial reposition for the player getting displaced with no suppression cost. And then all you're doing is allowing the vehicle player to just put the vehicle where they want with nothing but gain for the player that is having the unit that gets displaced. And I think that's like probably the best middle ground.
Yeah.
Um, maybe it's one of those things where displacement is just time consuming and they just didn't want to deal with that anyway, which is fine because it was time consuming.
I mean, if
But
we
I
want
think
to
it would
talk,
happen.
keep going. Keep going.
Yeah, sorry. I think it would happen less often if it was literally just like, okay, the only purpose of this mechanic is just to prevent vehicles from getting blocked.
Yeah.
And that's it. There's no benefit to doing it on purpose. Part of the reason before it was such a thing was because you'd have people with buses just repeatedly doing it on purpose. uh,
You get a suppression and you get a
right,
suppression and you get a
exactly.
suppression.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's probably a middle ground there.
I
I
mean,
don't know.
they definitely can't. If they were to bring displacement back, they definitely would not be able to like suppress things because that would be absurd under the new
It
rules.
would be absurd under the new
Yeah.
rules. Yeah.
Um, on the subject of things that take a lot of time, um, I think it's official. I think it's in. I don't know. Maybe you can tell me how you feel about this, but I think these games are longer, Kyle.
They are longer.
I think I'm at the point where I'm actually moving. I think I am moving through my activations faster than I was under the old edition at this point, and these games are going slower.
Yeah. No,
um,
I agree. I had most of my games, even the ones that were kind of lopsided, went very close to time.
yeah.
And this is with, they effectively cut 2 turns out of the game, right? Because now you only play 5 turns, and the first turn has essentially replaced deployment.
So yeah, I mean, I think one of the things is I think that there are so many effects in the like turn zero step of this game now,
Yeah.
that it sort of like cancels out the fact that there's no deployment. Um,
And a lot of it feels like administrative too,
it's
where
totally
where
administrative.
where you're not necessarily spending that time like making decisions. You're spending that time like figuring out where tokens go and measuring and stuff
Moving
like that.
moving terrain pieces
Moving
that
terrain
can't be where
pieces.
they're supposed to
Yeah.
be, which happened in at least like 70% of my games
Yeah.
this weekend. Um, sorry, Hob. I know I called you over like
Yeah.
every single game to move my terrain pieces. Um, which I do think from if you're running a large scale tournament with like 30 plus games every round, like make sure your judge staff is present and accounted for when that round starts, because you're just gonna need to go down each table pretty much and just move terrain accordingly.
And you're going to need a prescribed way to decide where you're going to put it too. Something like, I think essentially what Hob did, um, and what I tried to do in most of my games was just move it such that the terrain piece moves the shortest distance possible.
Yeah, I
And that
mean,
was I, sometimes it's not clear what that is, A, and B, like that's not applicable to every situation, depending on where the POI ends up, especially when you get like larger terrain pieces. But yeah,
yeah, no, it gets really complicated
it
and
gets awkward.
really awkward very quickly. We definitely the center POI in the finals game. We were playing on I'm not sure if it's an Imperial terrain piece or not, but it's like that like kind of circular ruins
Yeah.
that's like in three pieces.
Hmm.
And the POI fell on top of one of those like
Mm.
wall sections. And the thing about it is the POI is wider than that wall section. So
Yeah.
technically it can't go up there.
Right.
Um, and so we were gonna have to like spin the entire ruin after like blue and red had already like table side had
Yeah.
already been picked and all that junk. We ended up the three of us, me, Josh, and Hob, just like deciding we're just gonna put it on top of there because it could sit. It could
Right. It could
right.
sit flat. Yeah.
It could sit flat, and we were like, no, we're just gonna put it there. We understand that it's overhanging, and like that's like generally not a place that it could go, but otherwise it just screws up the game completely. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So I don't know. Just
I miss getting to play subjectives. Yeah, that's like a player agency thing that I really am sad that isn't there anymore. I
well,
feel
you
like I'm
can
thinking
you
about
can play
terrain and angles.
subjectives, Kyle. Have you played Destroy the Enemy Base yet?
I have not.
Okay, all right. You can place your own POIs wherever you want.
I've there are some things I like about the, and we're already an hour into this, so maybe we can do like a more full scale after playing enough games now. What do you think of the new edition type podcast?
Yeah.
Because there are some things I like about it. There are some things I don't like about it. One of the things I don't like about it is just that I feel like I care and I'm thinking about terrain and angles a lot less. Like first of all, you're always coming from the same direction now. Um,
Most of the time, yeah.
most of the time. Um, but also like it's just, there are things like placing the objectives where it'd be like, okay, if I place a box or a VAP or something next to this terrain piece, that's going to be like a place where I can secure it or claim it more easily or defend it, as or he's got this angle from his deployment zone, which is potentially very different depending on how you did your deployment zone bans, right? And it's like I'm thinking about angles and I'm thinking about terrain pieces a lot less, frankly. Um,
Yeah, it's sort
it
of like
feels like the terrain. I don't want to say it doesn't matter because it does, but I never rolled up to a table and was like, okay, like I would previously roll up to a table and spend some not insignificant amount of brain power looking at like the lanes between the terrain pieces and stuff like that. And I haven't done any of that in the new edition, and I haven't feel like I needed to.
well, you flip a mission and it is what it is.
Right,
Like
exactly.
there's nothing you can do about it. It
Right.
just that's what it is. Yeah. Which I don't know. I think there are some good things about that and bad things about that for sure. I definitely, I think we've talked about it before. I definitely hope that like there's more mission diversity in the future. Like,
Yeah. I agree with that too. I think my core point relevant to this specifically is just that I find myself thinking a lot less about terrain and I find that boring.
that's
But
fair.
anyway, um, any final thoughts from the tournament?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think this was like a learn anything crazy new sort of tournament. This was definitely like, I'm gonna play the thing that I think's the best right now, and turns out probably is.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm gonna do some iterating on the B2s, but I think I'm gonna end up in the same place as you, unfortunately.
yeah, I mean, I definitely am gonna mess around with some stuff and kind of go from there. There's obviously like a lot of characters that aren't seeing play yet. I definitely think there's probably a good rebel list that exists somewhere in the meta that I'd like to find at some point. I'm sure it includes Jin Urso. Um,
It definitely includes Han.
it definitely includes Han, for sure. 100%, not close.
Yep.
Um, Han is a beast in the new
And
edition.
probably Sabine.
Yes, I think both of those units are really quite good. I also think Leia Chewie, that Brains and Brawn
The two
shot
pip, yeah.
is so much better now that she's range 3.
Yeah.
Um, you can like really delete a unit with that, like uh and catch your opponent kind of on unawares. So
And now that fire support isn't really a thing anymore, and that's like still a fire support thing.
yeah. There's like I
Yeah.
think what like two of those in the game. There's that and Rex's Call Me Captain, and that's kind of it.
That's basically it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I definitely I think I'm definitely enjoying my time with the game a lot more than I was 3 weeks ago. So
That's
I'm
good.
yeah, I think this tournament kind of look going 9-0, you kind of feel good about whatever you do. um, but but I definitely am finding the fun again. So I'm certainly I know that we kind of came in like a little down on the new edition, and I've definitely found the things about it that I'm finding fun. So
That's
uh,
good.
yeah.
Would you
Um,
say this is where the fun begins?
I have said that so many times the past 4 days. So many times. Uh, yeah, best command card in the game, I think. Uh, at this point,
I think that's debatable, but it's definitely in the conversation.
I don't think it. Have you played with it yet?
Yeah. I played you with Anakin.
No. Oh, you played me with Anakin. You were playing Anakin?
Yeah. It was one of the
Okay.
first games that we did in my
Okay.
basement.
I
Uh,
remember the Rebel game. I don't really remember the Republic game. Okay. Yeah. I don't know.
yeah,
That card's just stupid. It is a
it is.
every game where I've needed it to win me the game, it has won me the game. Like on
Yeah.
the spot. Um, so I don't know. I've never felt that way about a command card in the old edition, really. Where when I played it, like I knew I was gonna win the game.
I think a Now You'll Die is in that conversation.
That's fair. I haven't played a lot of Help, but I also don't feel that it is that way now.
No, I don't think so. Primarily because, as we discussed earlier, Palp is really freaking slow.
Really
But
slow, and now you'll die like trading out is like not good enough anymore.
no, it's not.
Um,
So yeah, I think you might be right, but I think that's a more interesting conversation than just
yeah.
stamping
That's
it.
definitely that's my hot fire of the weekend. Congratulations, Anakin's good.
Yeah. News at 11.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know. Um, so. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more tournaments and if the results continue to kind of like bear out, it seems like our meta contenders, at least in the early stages of New Legion, is Anakin, good stuff, Vader, dewbacks,
yep.
um, and some form of red save droids, I guess. Um, it definitely seems like red saves is like white save lists don't seem to be making
Mm-mm.
the cut. Um,
No,
you know,
I agree.
so I don't know how that We'll see. We've seen Legion's lifetime kind of evolve over the years, and it definitely always takes Rebels a little bit of time to like figure out the combos because they die quicker, so they got to be more combo oriented.
Yeah. Rebels have had some time in the sun. I mean, they've had some very top medalists over the years.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, I think what was the most recent one? The Ahsoka, like Cassian FD.
yeah, some kind of Rebel Pierce spam, basically. And then before that, you had like Wookiees buses or Wookiees T-47s. Um, and then before that, you had Tauntauns. And then before that, you had Wonder Twins, Luke and Leia, in the early stages of the game. So Rebels have definitely had their time, but it's taken them a little bit to find their swing in
Yeah. I
new
definitely think
edition.
their new 70-point ARC troopers are gonna be pretty good.
Yeah, I agree with that. They won't be as tough as ARC Troopers, but they also throw more dice
Yeah.
and are cheaper. So
Yeah, and the astromech are also gives them a little bit of built-in durability, which isn't super great, but
in
it is not
theory,
nothing.
yeah, yeah. All right. Well, we're the Notorious Scoundrels. I'm Kyle.
And Mike.
Stay fresh, cheese bags.